Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to tonight's second half. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon. And folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to tonight's second half, shall we? All right, so today's bonus upload was an interview that I did with Brad prior to having any experience with cryptids, and he was up hiking in Mount Shasta, ran into a Bigfoot, and in typical Brad fashion, took a shot. I'm not saying that people should be hunting these creatures, and nor is Brad, but it is just his personality. He's an adrenaline junkie. I really honestly think he's one in a million, and he is a friend of mine, so you know, I gotta snicker at it, because it's just, when he said it and I had heard it on another channel a long time ago, I laughed, because I was like, no way, that was you. The interview that I'm going to share with you right now, we actually talk about the interview that I did for the bonus. And beside the angelic or Nordic alien experience, this is probably one of my favorite interviews ever done with Brad. Let's jump into it. All right, everyone. Tonight I have a really good friend of mine and of the channel. Brad is with us. Brad, how are you tonight?
Hello, Jeff. Glad to be back. Let me say hello to your wonderful audience. Hope everybody's doing well.
Awesome. You and I last spoke, I think, month ago, 2 months ago, and you had made note that you were not going out in the woods anymore. You were done officially after your last experience. You really felt kind of lucky at that one, you know, and it kind of gave you a little wake up call. This isn't your experience. I know you're gonna explain all of it, but I want to, you know, make sure that people really understand that, you know, this is not your experience. You're not a man that goes back on his word. You know, you when you say something, you mean it. So I'm going to turn the mic over to you and let you explain and share.
Okay, well, as Jeff said, this encounter was not my encounter. It had nothing to do with me, even though I do play a part in this. And as we get to that part of the story, your audience and you will see how I do have a small part in this, but not because I was out in the woods or had any type of physical or literal encounter myself. In fact, as usual, it was a strange set of circumstances how this story was related to me. I don't go anywhere, as I said on my last show with you, which was my last encounter, and I hope it will be my last encounter. I don't go anywhere there's not pavement anymore. I don't even go up, even if it's a well-traveled trail. If it's dirt, I won't go up it unless it's paved and that type of thing. And, you know, some people may say that I have become scared, and I'm sure there's some truth to that, but everything I've ever said is true. And if you have gone through what I've gone through, it would make you reticent about going into the woods at all, especially after you have some government agent tell you that you really need to quit while you're ahead. Yeah. And so I took that to heart, and that's the reason why I will never, except for the one exception that one of these days we'll have to tell people about, but except for the one exception that you and I know about, I will never go into the woods again. So what I'm going to do is, for your audience, I'm going to read, this story was related to me 2 Fridays ago. And because it took me so long to sit here and write this out, because I was trying to remember everything, I wrote most of it a while ago when it was fresh, and then I finished it today before I sent it to Jeff. So I'm just going to, rather than me trying to remember the sequence of events, I'm just going to read. I hope that's okay with your audience. I'm just going to read the email that I sent to Jeff. Yeah. Because it's fresher, and the facts, I know people think I usually give good details, and I do. I try to remember the best I can, but this was given to me by the people who had this encounter. So again, I want to reiterate, this is not my encounter. I was not there. I wasn't involved in this. This was told to me by 3 gentlemen in a diner. So I'm going to go ahead and start.
Yeah.
And I'm going to read the email that I sent to Jeff, and Jeff has a copy of this. Excuse me. Hey, Jeff, this is your old buddy, Brad. I hope things are well. Everything copacetic over here. Okay, buddy. So first, let me state emphatically, this encounter had nothing to do with me in a physical or literal sense. I only know about it because of a weird set of circumstances. I know that's nothing new as it relates to me. That took place about 2 weeks ago. I believe this happened on Friday, June 28th. I was out running some errands in the late afternoon, and after finishing them, I decided to stop at a local diner for an early dinner. This particular diner closes at 4 o'clock. It's like a lot of old people go there. That's why it closes so early. So I got there about 3:30, had what I normally do when I go there, the Philly cheesesteak and fries. And I was sitting in a booth, and to my direct left were 3 good old boys who appeared to be hunters. They were, big into guns, hunting, camouflage, and outdoors in general. You could tell by looking at them. Turns out this group was normally a foursome, as the older guy who... or what I would call the leader. Anyway, he had a son. I misread there. Let me get back to where I was at. Oh, yeah, 2 of them were older guys, probably a little older than me. The third guy was a younger man in his early 30s who turned out to be the son of what I would later call the leader of these guys. They were all salty white guys who were big into guns, hunting, camouflage, and the outdoors in general. Turns out the group is normally a foursome, as the other old guy, who was not the leader, also had a son in his mid-30s who wasn't with them at the diner. Apparently he was still at work and couldn't attend the meal that these 3 were having. These guys had arrived quite a bit before I did, because when I ordered my food, they were already finishing their meals. And as I was eating, I could hear everything they were saying, almost to the point of it irritating me. About halfway through my meal, I noticed their tone changed, and they started speaking where I could just barely hear them. The young guy kept looking around to see if anybody was listening. When he did, I would act like I was looking at my phone. Just about the same time I finished my dinner, I heard the young guy say to the older guys, he was east of the 89 above Flagstaff. The old man said he must have been pretty close to where we were. At this point, I hadn't put it together yet, but I was somewhat interested in what they were saying just because of the location they were talking about. Then the older guy that I called the leader said, Brad must have walked through the sunken valley that we walked through. Naturally, as soon as I heard that, I turned and looked at all 3 of these guys. My first thought was, holy shit, are they talking about me? The older guy continued, it's hard to believe he was out there in that area with a bolt-action rifle after what we encountered. I knew when he said that they were talking about me. The young guy continued, "This guy is either completely fearless or an idiot, or maybe both." And they all laughed. The quiet older man said he has encountered these animals a few times before, but even so, he must have been scared shitless. And as you know, Jeff, I was absolutely scared shitless. They all said some really nice things about me and how brave I was, not even being a hunter or an outdoorsman. They said some other really complimentary things, but for the sake of modesty, I'll move on in the story. At this point, they were getting ready to leave and wanting the waitress to bring their check. So she had brought mine. The diner was closing, and all the servers and the bus people were cleaning tables and refilling all the condiments on the tables. And as I was getting out of the booth with my check, I stopped by their table and I leaned over and I very quietly said, "Excuse me, guys, I'm sorry to interrupt, but by chance, are you guys talking about the Brad who killed the Dogman north and east of Flagstaff in the 89? They all seemed surprised and a little suspicious. The young guy completely turned to face me and said, "What is that to you?" Can you imagine my thoughts at that moment, Jeff? I wanted to say, "I'm Brad, knucklehead," but I didn't. And I could understand their apprehension. I said, "You guys must be listeners of Jeff Nadolny's Dogman research channel." I forgot the paranormal part. I knew it had to be your channel because I have never given it to anyone else since leaving the other guy 2 years ago. They all looked at each other and said, "You listen to him?" I said, "Not only do I listen, he and I have become friends." And that did seem to take a bit of the edge off, but the young guy still didn't seem real interested in talking with me. The older guy asked, "Are you a hunter?" I said, "No, just an old surfer from SoCal." I had to give him one hint, right, Jeff, to be fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
The old man continued, and I did that on purpose. That was their hint if they were paying attention. The old man, he continued, "What can we do for you?" And then he paused, like asking my name without asking. And I said, "I'm Brady." And they all gave me their names, and we shook hands. The young guy who was already suspicious of me said, "Brady, that's your name?" I nodded and moved on. They got their check, and we started to get up to move to the register. I just came right out and said, "Can I speak with you guys outside?" They looked at each other kind of tentatively and said, "Okay," collectively. As fate would have it, their car was parked right next to mine. So when we got outside, I leaned up against my car and I began my questioning. Then they all on cue folded their arms, in the universal signal for being defensive, and waited for me to start. I said, "I overheard you guys say that you were up in the same area Brad was east of 89. The old man who did most of the talking from this point forward said, "We walked through the very area he must have walked through because there are no other sunken valleys anywhere in that area. And we were about 5 or 6 miles, give or take, from the highway." I said, "You said you walked through it. Where were you headed?" He said, "We actually were trying to find the area Brad was in. Once we found it, we moved north following a small animal trail." I said, "I forgot to ask, what made you go where Brad went, and what were you intending to do?" The young guy spoke up and said, "We had heard there was a den of these creatures up in that area, and we figured where Brad encountered them was as good a place as any to start looking." I said, "A den? What were you going to do if you found the den?" The other old quiet guy, the older guy who was the quiet one, but he said firmly, quietly but firmly, he said, "Kill Dogman." I said, "You guys were planning on hunting and killing Dogmen?" The leader said, he said to me, "Boy, we didn't plan on killing them. We did kill them." They all chuckled knowingly. I haven't been called a boy in 30 years, but I let it go. I said, "How do you hunt Dogman and a den of them, no less?" The young guy smiled at me and said, "Fully automatic rifles with 40-round magazines," and then started laughing. I couldn't help myself. I said, "Holy shit," and I started laughing too. The old man who was the leader jumped in and said, "You ain't going to tell anybody you're not supposed to, are you, boy?" I said, "No, not anybody I'm not supposed to." I said, I'm a gun guy and I have been my whole life, so forgive me for asking, but how did you guys get a hold of fully automatic weapons? The quiet old man said, I'm a gunsmith. I said, nothing else needs to be said. They proceeded to tell me how the four of them had decided to kill as many of these animals as they could. And just so I'm clear, I didn't motivate these guys to do this hunt. They had been planning this for a long time. What I added was a place to start the search. That's where I come in, not because I was involved or because I motivated to do them or I know these. I don't even know these guys. They used where I had gone on my last encounter to start the search, their search, figuring there must have been a den or at least a population of these animals somewhere within hiking distance. Turns out they were absolutely right. The old man continued. About a week or maybe two after we listened to Brad on the show, we decided to go up there and see if we could find where he'd gone and then branch out from there. We are from that general area, pretty much knew where to start looking and retrace his steps. I said, what are you guys doing here? Meaning where we are. This is in northern Arizona, but a little south of where they live. And he said, we needed to stop by the local gun shop to pick up a scope for his rifle, and he pointed to the young guy. He said, we went up there heavily armed. All of us had fully automatic ARs and at least 2 handguns each, all 10 mil and 45 ACP. The young guy who's not here also had a .338 Win Mag bolt-action rifle on his back, and this guy, pointing to the other old guy, was carrying a Mossberg 590 12-gauge on his back. We were all carrying at least 5 to 6 40-round magazines. I kind of chuckled, and I said, if you're going to go after these animals, you did it right. I continued, so tell me what happened. He said, well, when we got there and arrived, we thought where we thought Brad had been, we didn't see anything or even have the feeling any of them were close. We got to the hill we thought he had initially seen the Dogman on, and we turned left or north. We followed a game trail around the base of these small hills for at least 2 miles. When we got to a plateau with a clearing on top, we looked across at this ridge that was probably a quarter mile directly across from our position. We saw a large, dark gray, almost black wolf sitting on its haunches, looking directly at us. The other old guy spoke up and said, I looked through my binoculars at him just to confirm what it was we were seeing. I was certain, as were the rest, that this was a Dogman. The leader interrupted as soon as we looked at him through the binoculars. He bolted down the other side of the ridge, and we began jogging down our hill and then up the other side where he had been. When we got to the very spot he had been, we looked down just in time to see him turn left into a box canyon that had hills on 3 sides and only one way in and one way out without going up steep hills. We followed him into the canyon with guns up and adrenaline pumping, only to lose him completely. He was gone. We scanned around the entire small canyon and finally the youngster. I'm using, just so your audience knows, I'm not using their names because I do not want to get these guys in trouble.
Right.
And so when I'm referring to youngster, there's 2 young guys and 2 older guys, right? We scanned around the small canyon, and finally the youngster saw a small opening, no bigger than a large manhole cover, high up on the hill on the left side. It had some shrubs around it with some fallen pieces of wood in front of the hole. It clearly appeared to be put in front to make the opening less obvious. It was about 30 to 40 feet from the top of the hill. The other youngster had the idea to go up the hill with a 45 in one hand and an M80 in the other. His intention was to toss it into the den to get them to come running out. Meanwhile, the other 3 of us chambered our weapons and stood shoulder to shoulder in the middle of the base of the canyon, pointing up at the den hole. As he climbed up the hill to the far side of the opening, we could see eye shine from the depths of the hole, but only just a little because of the angle we were standing at. When he got about 20 feet from the hole and to the left, he put the 45 down and took out an M80 and a lighter and lit it. He then stood awkwardly because of the incline and threw it into the hole. Time slowed down, and I watched him pick up the 45 and take 2 to 3 steps, and then we heard boom with a strange echo, which I think was because it was inside the hill. Within 2 seconds, as the kid was stumbling down the hill to the base, 6 to 7 dogmen came running out of the hole, barking and growling. We opened up on them, and it was a massacre. We pumped approximately 200 rounds into 6 or 7 Dogmen. I said, now this is me talking to him, I said, how do you know it was 200 rounds? He said, because 2 of the 3 of us actually put a second magazine in and emptied them. 80 plus 80 plus 40 equals 200 rounds. This does not include the 16 rounds of 45 ACP the youngster had fired when he got down the hill. We killed 5 of them, and at least 2 were wounded. I lost my track there. Okay, we killed 5 of them, and at least 2 were wounded, but made it back into the den. They had an arm that was attached, but only by some thin ligaments. There was blood everywhere. We basically cut them in half. When we were done firing, we quickly reloaded, expecting a second group to come out, but it never did. The other young guy walked up the other hill on the far side directly behind us to get a look into the hole. He could see eye shine from at least another 6 or 7 animals. It appeared that they weren't interested in any further interaction. We thought about going on a full attack and actually going up and into the hold and finishing the job. I started laughing when he said that. I'm like, these guys, man.
Yeah.
And finishing the job, the other guy said we need to not push our luck, and we started backing out of the canyon, covering each other all the way back to the car. We were anticipating a rear attack the entire time we were moving back to the car. It never came. I said, that is a hell of a story, and thank you for taking it to those animals, and thank you for telling me this. I know you didn't have to. He said, it was nice to tell someone who believes in these sadistic animals. We got to get going, he said. They all said goodbye and climbed into their truck. I said, take care, guys. Make sure you keep listening to the show. I said that because I knew I was going to give this story to you, and so I wanted to, because they're going to know who they were talking to. If they're listening to this show right now, they're going to know who I am. Yeah. They're going to know that we're talking to Brad. Anyway, I said, take care, guys, and make sure you keep listening to the show. The young guy was sitting in the front as they pulled out. And as he faced me, he rolled down his window, because he was in the passenger seat. He rolled down his window and said, take care, Brady. And he smiled with like a toothy grin, and they took off. I did get the distinct feeling that he was suspicious about who I was. I got in my car and pulled out. When I caught them at the parking lot driveway as we're getting ready to turn onto the main road, I was right behind them. I saw on the back of their pickup a sticker on the back of their pickup that said, you have to believe, with a picture of Bigfoot. One hell of a story. I was happy to have played a small part in what I call the Highway 89 massacre. My words. Peace out.
Yeah. Now, the reason why he did explain why he narrated it, kind of, when he shared this with me, it was, I think, a couple of days after. It was, I think, still in June. And
yeah, I think it was either it was still real fresh in my mind at that time.
Yeah. And I had asked a lot of questions because there was a lot of questions that had popped up. I'm just going to bring a couple of things up that I had asked, because, where they were was where Brad was the last time he had just went hiking with his bolt action, and he had seen the 2 Dogmen on this kind of ridge, and he had kind of seen them playing what appeared to be playing. And I was like, wait, was that where the den was? No, they were, a couple of miles from there?
Yeah. So as it happens, so where I was in this little sunken valley, right, which I talked about in my encounter, they walked through that very same valley, and when they got to the end of that valley on the far side of it, they could see the hill that I was talking about, where the tree was and the rocks, and they looked up on that hill, and they actually, because they were there with fully automatic weapons, so they weren't really scared or intimidated by anything. So they weren't being quiet or anything. They were just, talking, and they came within probably 50 yards of that hill and were looking up at it. And there was no sign of a Dogman, nothing. And so they started following past this little valley, if your audience can picture it, past this little valley, there's like a space of like 100 yards after the tree line stops. And then there's this small, like, I guess you'd call it an animal trail. It's a game trail where small animals use. You can tell that they use it because it's right up against the hills. And so they followed that for 2 miles, roughly, according to him. And when they got to, it kind of led, and they went up onto a plateau. And the reason that they decided to go up on this plateau is because it was pretty clear. There were no trees in the way, so they could get a good view of everything. And when they got up on that plateau, they looked across, and there was like a rolling ridge with a tree on top. And right next to the tree was a Dogman sitting like a dog does on its haunches. It was just huge, right? And it looked at them, and that's when they realized. They looked in the binoculars, and they realized, and then they started following it. And I happened to catch a glimpse of it going to this little box canyon. And when I say little, I mean, this is not like that 8 canyon story where, the box canyon they're talking about is, 2 miles long and 4 miles wide across. No, this was like a little box canyon that was probably only, based on what I'm hearing him say, maybe 100 yards from one side of the hill to the other.
Mm. That's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And they, they had the disadvantage, and the advantage. And I remember you and I talking about this because you always want to have the high ground.
Always.
They had the low ground, but they did have automatic rifles. So they did have the advantage.
Yeah, I don't think these animals, at least based on what he told me, and these guys seem like, these guys are, it sounded to me, I don't know these guys, and, like you pointed out, Jeff, the reason that you can tell this story isn't bullshit is because they didn't come up to me. Right. They didn't come up to me and start talking about this and volunteer, nor did they know who I was. I overheard this. Yeah. Them talking about this. So to me, their story is incredibly credible, right? Yeah. That's a weird way to say it, but it was a very credible story. And you really, when you get in a situation like that, you always want to be, military tactics dictate that if you can, you at least want to be eye level with your enemy or above them. But there was no way for them to get into that position because they would have had to have been standing with their feet in awkward positions if they would have been on the hill directly across from where the den hole was. There would have been no way for them to really get accurate shots. And what if one of them stumbled down? So they decided that they were going to stand directly in front of the den hole down, 100 feet or whatever it was. He never did say how far down it was. He said it was about 30 to 40 feet from the top of the hill is where the den hole was. And so they decided to just stand shoulder to shoulder, with fully automatic weapons. And the guy that went up there, he's the guy that was the bravest, to be honest with you. He went up there with a 45 in his hand and actually threw an M80 into this hole. Yeah. And, like you were talking about, that's like an eighth of a stick of dynamite. Yep. Yeah. Which I'm sure pissed them off. And that's why they came out the way that they did. And then they were just standing there waiting. It was a pretty good plan, actually, how they executed it, because as they came out, they just unloaded. You're talking 200 rounds in 5 animals, maybe 6 or 7 animals. So what's that, 30, 35 rounds each? Yeah. Think about that. And we're talking 5.56. We're not talking about handgun ammunition. Right. And, what, like you said, and I said as well right now, this wasn't fresh in your mind like the first time you told me. The first time you told me, it was like, I really think it was 3 days after, because you had sent me an email saying, get a hold of me, but I didn't get the email, and you texted me, are you, what's up, buddy? And then I'm like, I didn't get an email. And then I called you, and then we talked. And so it was about 3 days. So it was pretty fresh. Oh yeah, I was excited. I was almost more excited with their story than I was with my own. Yeah, because these guys planned this out. This was no accident or happenstance or nothing like that. This was a my part in this, I played a very small part, but my part in this was they just used my story to gauge where they should start their hunt.
Right.
That's really all my only part in this, right? It had nothing to do with me. It's just that they said, okay, well, this is where he was. I know, and they're all three of them or all four of them are from that area. Let's say within 20 miles of that area.
Yeah.
All of them live, so they're fairly familiar with where it was, and they went up there, and sure enough, it happened. But I don't know. He never did say, the young guy. I wanted to make this clear to your audience. He never did say where he had heard there was a den of them.
Yeah.
But I got the distinct impression from these guys that these guys are serious individuals.
Right.
Like, these guys aren't me that's just a guy with some balls that decides I'm going to go, like I did. I'm going to go hunt a Dogman. These guys I got the distinct feeling that the two older ones are ex-military.
Survivalists, maybe.
Yeah, well, be that or ex-military, maybe ex-special forces. I don't know that they were, but that's just the feeling that they gave me. They didn't seem to have any fear whatsoever of these animals.
Right. They were tactical on the way, because there was, and I remember this because when you told me, my brain was just blown away. But the one thing that made me think how tactical they were is the kid with the bolt action. His dad, when they were backing out, his dad told him to go up on the opposite ridge in case any came out as they were backing out, so he could have a clear shot at them to keep, line of sight on them.
Thank you for bringing that up. I didn't put that in this email that I sent you, but that's true. He was left by himself high up on the other hill, and he had a scoped 338, which is it's a little more powerful than a 30-06. So you're talking about, you hit him in the head with that, it's all over.
Yeah.
But he was up on the side, and then what he did was he covered their exit from the box canyon, and then when they got to the opening of the box canyon, they all spread out and covered him while he came down and ran out. So and then each of them would go 50 yards, and then they would cover each other all their way out. The 2 miles back to the sunken, and then the 5 miles back. They were completely tactical all the way out because, and rightly so, they thought there would be a counterattack. That these guys, these animals are very tactical. They thought that they would marshal their forces, and there'd be 8 or 10 of them would be following them, but they never did.
Right. Excuse me. I might be wrong, but I'm trying to remember because we had a conversation. We talked after you told me this, which was about the length of what you just shared. You and I talked for, I don't know, an hour more about certain things. I remember making a statement. For some reason, I keep thinking like there was no phone. They didn't bring their phones.
No, they didn't. That's true. They didn't bring their. He didn't tell me that in that, but the young guy, not the leader, but the young guy had said that because I asked at one point. That's another thing. You got a good memory, dude. That's another thing that I forgot to put in the email. That one of I asked was me asking the question. I said, "Well, how come you guys didn't get pictures?" And the young guy said, "Well, we didn't take our phones."
Right.
And then I thought, that's interesting.
Yeah, because we were talking about how that the two government agents were that one that walked up on you while you were walking out and the other one that was on the back of the truck. How the hell they knew you were there, but they didn't know they were there. And I was like, did you have your phone with you? And you're like, yeah.
And I did.
So maybe that was, because like you said, you had your phone. You were there. You had, had a little skirmish compared to this with it. Helicopter flew over, and then one of these guys came out at you to, address the situation or clean up your mess. But yet, here, there was no kind of repercussion.
I asked him, Jeff. I asked him at the very end of the conversation, and forgive me. I hope your audience will forgive me because I did forget quite a few things. That's why I started writing this a couple of weeks ago, but I'd say half of it I did today because I wanted to give it to Jeff. I promised him I'd give it to him. I wanted to keep my word, but I had asked him if he encountered anybody or any like government agency or officer from any, 3-letter agency or anything like that. And he goes, well, why would we? And I said, well, I don't know. I'm just asking, just out of curiosity. And he goes, no, we didn't have our phones. How would have anybody known we were there?
Right.
So these guys, dude, I'm telling you, these guys were, if I was going to go hunting Dogman, they might, if I could go with these 4 guys, they might convince me to go out there again with them. Let's put it that way.
They went, like you said, you felt that there was something different about the 2 older guys, maybe ex-special forces, whatever, ex-service, but they had one goal in mind, and it wasn't getting pictures. It was, let's go hunt these things.
And they were not apologetic about it. So there's going to be a small part of your audience and a large part of some other people who do these channels audience who are going to completely would hate these guys,
right?
Because they're not about peace and let's go pray to them and get down and ask their permission to these guys are straight up what I would call warriors and just decided, you know what? And I got the feeling that they were longtime listeners.
Well, they've killed, like you and I said, Dogman kill. Like
they're opportunists.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think you had asked, or one of them had said, but didn't get into detail, that one of them had seen a Dogman at one time years ago or something like that, but he didn't get into detail, and it wasn't around that area. Like they just used your experience because they were close by.
Right. That's true. One of them had mentioned he was out just hunting. It wasn't a tactical engagement. It was just he was out hunting, and he had seen what he believed was a Dogman. He didn't get close to it. He was far enough away that it didn't see them. He was looking at it through binoculars, but he was convinced from that day forward that these animals existed.
Right. Yeah. To me, this experience, when you told me about it, I was, blown away because I'd never heard anything like it,
This is why, Jeff, let me just say, and I said this on another show one time, and I took a lot of shit for it. The truth is, dude, as evil and wicked as I believe these animals are, and again, I don't think that every single one of them is always thinking about killing humans whenever they get the chance.
Right.
I don't believe that, but I do think they're opportunists, and if they're hungry and you happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, they have no problem tearing you, into shreds.
Yeah.
None. And will drag you back to the den, and they'll all feast on you. I really believe that about them, right?
Yep.
But I said this on another show one time, that when you bring the full power of man to bear, these animals, we shouldn't fear these animals, at least not to the degree that we do. They should fear us.
Yeah.
Because this group proves that if 4 guys that know what they're doing, and these guys didn't even have grenades or grenade launchers or just fully automatic weapons, and look at what they did to them. Imagine if we had 12 spec ops guys that had rocket launchers, grenade launchers, fully automatic weapons, hand grenades. I mean, come on. You're talking a squad of special forces could wipe out 100 of these animals. No problem.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is why I've never had the attitude that some people, not necessarily just on your show, but other shows have had where, oh my God, we have to be, these animals are we either have to worship them on the one hand, or we have to be so afraid of them that we don't, do live our lives the way that we should. No, it's not that way. We are still, and I know I'm going to take shit for saying this, but we are still the dominant animal, if you will, on this earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when we bring our full power to bear, these animals present very little problem.
Right.
Very little.
Like you said, they're opportunistic. They are, like me solo hiking, you solo hiking, or random hikers, Joe Blow that's out in Colorado somewhere that doesn't have a firearm with him. And, like you said, wrong place, wrong time. Bam, opportunistic.
You're in a lot of trouble, dude. You're in a lot of trouble, and it's gotten to me. And I don't want people to say I don't fear them. I do. This is why I'll never go in the woods again.
Right.
But when you're talking about guys like this who have the ability to bring these types of weapons to bear, I mean, I took it like when those animals were looking, when they were all still huddled in that den. And the one kid got up there and looked into the den from across one hill to the other, and he could see them in there. I got the distinct visual in my mind that they were all cowering in there because they knew that if they came out, they were going to get literally cut in half.
Right. Like almost they didn't know what to do.
Right. They were exactly. That's exactly right. Like they didn't know what to do. They were just hoping that these guys wouldn't finish the job.
Right. Right.
And these guys would have been fully capable of doing that. I mean, honestly, I think even if they would have went up there and stood right in front of the hole, I think they would have chopped them into bits.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I know that, there's going to be some people that hear this and be like, oh, you're starting, like I heard on the other channel, now it's going to be unsafe for these animals, for us to walk in these areas. It was already unsafe for us to walk in these areas, right?
Yeah.
This makes them think, as far as I'm concerned, this makes them think twice about just randomly attacking people because they don't know what type of person this is. Is this one of these people that has these weapons that'll just turn us into hamburger?
Right.
And that's exactly what those were his words, by the way. He said, we turned him into hamburger.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, my view is, these guys went for a mission. They went on a mission, and they wanted to see that if they could do it, and they did. I don't suggest that everybody go out and unless you have the know-how of doing what they did. Being a gunsmith and such, but not everybody can. So don't go out with your AR-15 and 4 of your friends with just semi-automatic and think that you're going to get out of there. It's just...
No.
And
these guys were serious individuals, Jeff.
Yeah.
You could tell just by looking at them. They all had that... I don't know if you've ever seen it, but like when you see a special forces guy or an ex-special force, there's an air about him, like a confidence, like there's no situation that he can't handle. All these guys had that.
Right.
And you can just tell these guys, they put a plan together. They researched what they were going to do. They made their weapons better than what, you and I have access to. And, they drew up a plan and they went and executed it then. And that just goes to show, if nothing else, if you don't agree with anything else I've said tonight, it just goes to show that when 3 or 4 guys get together and decide they're going to do something, it doesn't matter, Bigfoot, reptilian, crawler, whatever. If you have 4 guys that are well armed, that know what they're doing, understand tactical awareness and all that stuff, they're a formidable force no matter what they face.
Yeah, exactly. You said it, and there are people that are going to be upset, like, oh my God, why, but just because someone feels one way doesn't mean they feel the other, like these things are monsters. They are not friendly. They're not like Harry and the fucking Hendersons. You know what I mean?
These are not furry woodland creatures. That's what I used to say all the time. They're not. And I'm not suggesting that we need to go exterminate every single one of them. However, if it turns out that they are not natural and were not put here by our God, and they're some sort of a hybrid that we created, well, then I have no problem for them being wiped out.
Right. This just shows that they can be.
Yeah, that's another thing too. You know, some of your, I mean, actually, I don't even think it was one of your guests, but some other people have said that, you know, and again, it's possible, you know, that there's some other type of Dogman that is some sort of spiritual, or, you know, I hate to use that word, but, you know, can camouflage itself and bullets don't affect it and all this other crap I've heard. Maybe it's true. I don't know. I mean, if you'd have told me that Dogman existed 5 years ago, I would have laughed in your face and look at what I've experienced, right? So It's possible, but here's what I know. In my experiences, which have been many, and these guys experience, these animals are completely flesh and bone and can be killed and even massacred.
Yeah.
That's what I know. Yep. Now, whether or not there's another type out there that exists that somehow bullets don't work, okay, maybe, but I've never encountered it.
Right.
That's what I know.
Right. You know what you know, and, you know, I don't know, because I never shot at one. I know what I saw. I don't know what the hell it was. It just was really scary. You know, but the point of this experience was they can be stopped. And they were.
They can be stopped in a big way, Jeff. That's what we learned from this experience. And again, I don't want anybody to think, you know, this was somehow, you know, I told these guys secretly, because I'm sure I have my haters on your channel and other channels that hate me, and I'm sure he told these guys to go do this. I never saw these guys before. I did not know them.
Right.
I'd never talked to them before. These are people that just so happened to be listeners to your show.
Right.
And I overheard a conversation. And again, they didn't come to me. I went to them. Yeah. So what reason would they have to lie about this?
Right. You intruded on their dinner and their story. You know, they're shooting the shit, having their, you know, country fried steak and gravy, and out comes Brady to say, hey, you know, I heard what, and, you know, so 100%.
I'm pretty sure that young guy knew who I was. I don't know it for sure, but I'm pretty sure
Brady is Brad with a Y.
Right.
That's exactly the best part about it too.
He's like, your name's Brady? I said, yeah, and he just kind of smiled at me like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
I gave him hints. I mentioned that I was
the SoCal surfer.
SoCal.
Yeah, you did.
So if they listen to this, they're gonna know for sure.
Yeah. So, all right, now I want to kind of switch subjects real quick before we end the interview. I was not aware that at one point you had a Bigfoot encounter. I knew of one, but I didn't know of one that was prior to all of your Dogman experience. And Brad and I he's never going back out in the woods ever again, unless, you know, one thing does occur. But we are going to have an upload in the future, maybe not the near future, but in the future, where Brad shares his Bigfoot experience with us. That he had shared.
I'm going to go ahead and announce, because I felt like I cheated your audience, because I know you had talked about this last September when I had a Bigfoot encounter in a different place, a separate, not up where I went, where we were just talking about this last encounter that these guys had, but in a different place, more like in central Arizona. I had a Bigfoot encounter, and I was going to tell Jeff about it. And I did tell Jeff about it, but then I panicked because they erased. I had a picture, several pictures actually, of very clear footprints that were 17 inches. And I didn't share this with Jeff because I panicked when they erased the pictures, and then I actually took my phone to the Apple store to find out if I could retrieve them, and they said that those photos, they never existed. They're not in my memory. Well, there's only one group of people that can do something like that.
Yeah.
So I panicked a little bit, and I remembered the warnings that I got. But that last guy made it clear to me that nobody believes me anyway. So I think what Jeff's planning on doing is having me give both of my. These are not fully engaged, let's put it that way, encounters with a Bigfoot where like it's a knockdown, drag out. These are just encounters that one was in 2006 or 2007 up at Mount Shasta. I was hiking with somebody that worked for me. And then the other one was last September. I was walking in a different place, hiking in a different place by myself, and I encountered a Bigfoot. But I'll leave the rest of that for the next
so it's going to
show.
be not in the near future, but in the future, because I know you've got some stuff coming up, and but it just, I never knew, and I'm not going to mention the channel or whatever, but I never knew that you had shared this on another channel until last night, and I was like, wait, what? And you're like, yeah.
Well, I wasn't interviewed.
You were
He
interviewed.
just read,
right.
He just read the story.
Right.
That's all.
And it's actually a very interesting experience, but we'll save that for a whole different day.
Yep.
But yeah, this was, thank you for, being a man of your word. And, like I did say, because I had made an announcement, I was like, in a week or whatever, I'm going to have Brad on. And, people, I said this, people have things that come up. People have, issues and shit, unannounced issues that pop up, and he couldn't come on. But you did. You finally were able to, and you've always been a man of your word.
So your audience knows I'm a financial guy, and there's a lot of things that happen in the market that I have to pay attention to and that I get involved with. And sometimes it gets consuming because I'm in front of my computer screen a lot, watching the markets and stuff. I don't want to give away too much of what I do because I don't want anybody showing up at my house. But I'll just say I'm a finance guy, and sometimes that means I have to work a lot longer at my computer during the day, and sometimes even into night. And sometimes with that, I get busy studying charts and stuff like that, and then I don't have the time to rap with Jeff about certain things. Not that I don't want to, but we all have life, and shit happens, right? So,
right. No, I just appreciate it.
I'd get you the story.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. And you've always, you've never said, you're going to come on and not. But except that one time, but there was a valid reason for it, and I completely understood. Which in the near future, you guys will know about it. So,
yeah, I panicked. I absolutely
Who
panicked.
Who wouldn't?
I don't want to ever find myself on a list, although I'm sure I'm already on some list somewhere. But when they erased those photos, I kind of panicked, as Jeff will tell you. I'm sure he's mentioned it. I panicked a little bit because, when that happens and you're like, wait a minute, I took these photos. I saw them on my phone, and now the Apple people are telling me that these photos were not in the memory nowhere.
Right.
Well, that's a little scary because they should have at least been in my memory.
In your cloud, or somewhere, but nope. And I remember that day, I've never heard you freaked out, and we've talked for a while, me and you have become friends. And, that day, it was a very short conversation, because you're just like, I'm like, hey, you still coming on? You're like, I'm not coming on. I'm not even going to talk about it. Don't want to talk about it. Done. And I'm like, okay. That's pretty much the conversation.
And I felt I held that feeling for quite a while until last month or 2 months ago now, whenever it was that I had my last encounter, where that guy told me that he just looked at me point blank and said, nobody believes you anyway. You can go on. He even mentioned going on your show. So I was like, that was kind of to me like, okay, they really don't care anymore. So I'm willing to share. Those are the only two other stories that I have. I don't have any reptilian stories. I don't have any crawler stories. I don't have any ghost stories or anything. Some of the stuff Jeff's into, the paranormal, I don't have any stuff like that. All I have left is a couple of Bigfoot stories. And I don't want to build them up because they're nothing like the Dogman encounters that I had. These are just but these things did happen. One happened way before I even knew what a Dogman was, and the other one happened last September in a completely different place.
Right.
So, but I'll be glad to share them. We can make a show of it whenever you decide. If you want to wait a few weeks, or
we'll wait a couple weeks or whatever. Let things settle and see how you feel in a couple weeks. But let's end this interview. Obviously, don't hang up because I want to talk to you for a little bit.
Let me say goodbye to your audience.
Absolutely.
I want to thank them for tuning in and listening to me. I appreciate your audience. I read a lot of the comments, and I really appreciate the type of people you have for the most part. And until next time, take care and peace out.
All right. It was awesome having you on. Thank you. And right there is why I love Brad, and I can't say it enough. I love his personality. He is just a really super nice guy. Very spiritual, very at one with our Lord Jesus. But once again, an adrenaline junkie. And these creatures are apex predators. You can't forget that. It's not like they are harmless little creatures that have done no harm to humanity. They have. I'm not condoning, but I'm not saying that what these guys have done and what Brad has done is wrong either. And there you have it, folks. I hope you all enjoyed tonight's second half as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you, and I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is honestly your support that keeps the channel growing and going, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we all deserve, and I do appreciate that. Thank you. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real, they are out there, and they are dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth. And God bless you all.